Hello and welcome back to James and Elena's English Chat. I am so glad you're joining us today for a brand new episode.
Hi, everyone. It is wonderful to be here. We have a very interesting topic today that I think everyone can relate to.
Before we dive in, I want to remind our listeners that this podcast is designed for intermediate learners, specifically at the B1 and B2 level. We use clear language to help you practice.
That is right. And remember, please do not worry if you do not understand every single word we say. It is perfectly okay. Just relax and try to follow the flow of our conversation. That is the best way to learn.
Exactly. Just enjoy the chat. Today, we are talking about something I call the mystery of the missing hour. Have you ever looked at the clock and wondered where the last 3 hours went?
Oh, all the time, James. It feels like time just disappears sometimes. Why did you choose this topic for today?
Well, it happened to me this morning. I had a very simple plan. I wanted to go to the gym at 8 a.m. I had my bag ready and my shoes on, but then I couldn't find my car keys. I looked on the kitchen table where I usually put them. Nothing. I looked under the sofa cushions. Nothing. I even started looking in crazy places, like the vegetable drawer in the fridge.
The fridge? James, why would your keys be with the carrots?
I was panicking. My neighbor, Mr. Miller, saw me through the window. I was running around the house like a crazy person. He actually knocked on the door to ask if I was okay or if I was chasing a mouse. It was so embarrassing. By the time I found the keys, they were in the pocket of a coat I haven't worn in weeks. It was 9:30 a.m. My whole morning was gone. One missing item ruined my schedule.
That is a perfect example of how a small problem can derail or ruin your entire day. I actually read an interesting article about this recently. It talked about the importance of a home for your items. If an object doesn't have a specific home, it becomes a wanderer, and wanderers always get lost.
A home for items? That sounds like I need to be much more organized than I actually am.
It is simpler than you think. I used to lose my reading glasses every single day. I would leave them in the garden or next to the sink or on top of the piano. I spent so much time walking around the house asking, where are they? Now I have a rule. My glasses have two homes. Either they are on my face or they are in a small wooden bowl on the hallway table. If they are not in one of those two places, I'm in trouble.
So the mystery is usually just us being messy. That makes sense. When I don't have a system, my brain feels messy too. Finding those keys took more than just time. It took all my energy. I was too tired to even go to the gym after that.
Precisely. It's about being kind to your future self. When you put the keys in their home today, you are giving a gift to the James of tomorrow morning. You are saving him from the mystery of the missing hour.
I like that idea. A gift for my future self. Maybe I should go buy a key bowl right now before I lose them again. But honestly, even with my keys in my hand, I often feel like my day is just one big messy bucket. I throw things into it all day, and by 5 o'clock, the bucket is overflowing, but I feel like I haven't actually finished anything important.
That is such a common feeling. It reminds me of a famous lesson about time management. People often use a glass jar to explain it, but since you mentioned a bucket, let's think about a beach bucket. Have you ever tried to fill one with both stones and sand?
Actually, I have a very clear memory of doing exactly that. When I was about 7 years old, my family went to the seaside for a weekend. I had this bright blue plastic bucket, and I was determined to bring home the best of the beach. I spent the whole morning filling the bucket with beautiful, fine white sand. It looked perfect, like a little mountain of sugar.
It sounds lovely, but I guess you found something else you wanted to keep?
I did. About 10 minutes before we had to leave, I found 4 huge, smooth gray stones near the water. They were heavy and felt like treasure. I tried to push them into my bucket, but they just sat on top of the sand. Every time I tried to carry the bucket to the car, the stones rolled off and hit my toes. I was so upset because I couldn't fit the big treasures into my bucket because of all that sand.
That is the perfect metaphor for our time, James. In this story, the big stones are your most important goals. These are things like your health, spending time with your family, or finally finishing that English project. The sand represents the small stuff, things like scrolling through social media, answering unimportant emails, or worrying about small chores.
So because I filled my bucket with sand first, there was no room for the big stones.
Exactly. If you put the sand in first, the rocks will never fit. But if you do it the other way around, if you put the big rocks in the bucket first, you can then pour the sand in afterwards. The sand is small, so it flows into the empty spaces around the rocks. In the end, everything fits.
That makes so much sense. I realize now that I spend a lot of my morning doing sand tasks. Yesterday, I spent an hour organizing my digital photo folders and another hour looking at funny videos of dogs. By the time I wanted to study my English vocabulary, which is a big rock for me, I was too tired. My bucket was already full of dogs and digital folders.
We all do it because the sand tasks are usually easier and they make us feel busy. But being busy isn't the same as being productive. I had to change my own habits recently. My big rock is writing my new lesson plans. I used to check my phone messages as soon as I woke up, but the messages are like sand. They just keep coming. Now I write for 30 minutes before I even touch my phone. I put the rock in first.
So the secret is to schedule the big rocks first and let the sand fill the gaps later. Don't wait to see if you have time at the end of the day because the sand will always expand to fill the space.
Precisely. If you don't protect the space for your big stones, the sand will decide your schedule for you.
That sand analogy makes so much sense, Elena. It actually reminds me of a very stressful afternoon I had in Florence, Italy a few years ago. I tried to fit too many big rocks into one single day, and it was a total disaster.
Oh, I love Florence, but it can be very busy. What happened? Did you try to see every museum in the city?
Exactly. I had this crazy list. I wanted to see the David statue, visit the Uffizi Gallery, eat at a famous pasta shop, and buy a leather jacket at the market, all before my 4 o'clock train to Rome. I was treating my holiday like a military mission.
That sounds exhausting, James. Florence is a city where you should relax and enjoy the atmosphere, not run a marathon.
I learned that the hard way. I was running through those beautiful narrow streets with a heavy backpack, sweating and checking my watch every 2 minutes. I finally reached the train station at 5 minutes past 4. I literally saw my train pulling away from the platform. I was standing there, holding a warm sandwich I didn't even have time to taste, feeling completely defeated.
That is the perfect example of why we need buffer time. Have you heard that expression before?
Buffer time? I think I can guess, but what does it mean exactly in a schedule?
A buffer is like a cushion or a space between two things to prevent them from crashing. In a schedule, buffer time is extra time you add for things you can't control, like a long line at the museum, a slow waiter, or simply getting lost. If you had added 30 minutes of buffer time to your afternoon, you would have caught that train easily.
I definitely had 0 buffer time. I thought every minute had to be productive. But because I tried to do everything, I ended up stuck in the station for 3 hours waiting for the next train. I felt like I'd wasted the whole day.
It's a common mistake. We often think that more is better, but in travel and in life, it's usually about quality over quantity. I once read an interesting article about slow travel. It says it's much better to sit in one square and really watch the people and the architecture than to run through 5 different landmarks just to take a photo for social media.
I agree now, but at the time I felt guilty if I wasn't moving. How do you manage your own time without feeling like you're being lazy?
I have a personal rule now. I call it the 20% rule. Whatever time I think a task will take, I add 20% more. If Google Maps says it takes 10 minutes to walk to a restaurant, I give myself 12 or 15. That extra time is my peace of mind. If I see a beautiful sunset or a cute dog on the way, I can stop for a moment. I'm not a slave to my watch anymore.
A dog buffer. I love that. If I had given myself a gelato buffer in Florence, I wouldn't have been so stressed about the train. I would have actually enjoyed my ice cream instead of eating it while running.
Exactly. When we remove the buffer, we remove the joy. We become so focused on the destination that we forget to enjoy the journey. And usually, the best parts of a trip are the things you didn't plan for.
That's so true. The only thing I remember about that afternoon was the back of a train and a very sweaty shirt. It wasn't exactly the Italian dream. Speaking of things that didn't go as planned, that train trip reminds me of my guitar summer. Have I told you about that disaster?
The guitar summer? No, but it sounds like a very short story. Did you actually learn how to play?
Hardly. I bought this beautiful acoustic guitar. I even bought a leather strap and some cool picks. I was ready to be a rock star. But then the yes trap happened. My neighbor asked if I could help him paint his garage on Saturday. I said yes. My cousin asked if I could watch his two very loud dogs for a weekend. I said yes. I even said yes to a History of Spoons museum tour with a friend.
A spoon museum? James, you really have a hard time saying no, don't you?
I really do. I felt bad saying no, but by the time I finally sat down with my guitar, I was too tired to even hold it. It just sat in the corner of my living room gathering dust. It felt like I was being a good friend by saying yes to everyone, but I was failing at the one thing I actually wanted to do.
That is exactly what the yes trap is. It is the feeling that we must agree to every request to be a nice person. But we forget one very important rule. Every time you say yes to someone else's unimportant task, you are automatically saying no to your own goals.
That is a bit painful to hear, but it is so true. I was saying no to my music every time I picked up a paintbrush for my neighbor. Why is it so hard to just say no?
I think we are afraid of disappointing people. I had a similar problem last year. I love reading, but I found myself going to every single dinner party or social event I was invited to. I was exhausted, and I hadn't finished a book in months. I realized I was living my life for other people's schedules.
So what did you do? Did you just start telling people, leave me alone, I'm reading?
Not exactly. I just practiced a kind way to say no. I started saying, that sounds lovely, but I've already committed that time to something else. That something else was usually just me on my sofa with a book. I felt guilty at first, but then I finished 3 books in 1 month, and I felt so much happier.
I like that. Committed to something else. It's not a lie because you are committed to your own hobby. I should have said that to the Spoon Museum guy.
Exactly. Saying no to the things that don't matter is the only way to protect the space for the things that do. If you don't protect your time, other people will definitely spend it for you.
It's about boundaries, isn't it? I thought I was being helpful, but I was actually just being disorganized with my priorities. My guitar eventually went into the closet and I haven't seen it in months. Well, on another topic, my mornings are usually a perfect example of that disaster. I think I'm being helpful by sleeping an extra 5 minutes, but I'm actually just making the rest of my day much harder.
We often forget that the morning version of ourselves is usually tired, grumpy, and not very smart. I used to be the same way until I realized I needed to start being a friend to my future self.
A friend to your future self? That sounds like a time travel movie, but I totally get what you mean about being not very smart in the morning. Last Tuesday was a total nightmare. I was running around the house like a crazy person looking for my son's left shoe. We were already 5 minutes late for the school bus. I was sweating, the dog was barking because he thought it was a game, and I couldn't even find my car keys. Do you know where I eventually found them? In the refrigerator. I must have put them there when I was getting the milk for cereal. It was embarrassing.
The refrigerator. Oh, James, that's a classic. But that is exactly why the 10-minute ritual in the evening is so powerful. It's about doing the thinking at night so you don't have to do it at 7 a.m. when your brain is still asleep. I started this habit about a year ago after reading a book about daily routines.
10 minutes? That seems like a very short amount of time to fix my chaotic life. What can you actually do in 10 minutes that stops the shoe in the fridge situation?
It's the small, boring things. I spend 5 minutes prepping the coffee machine so I only have to press one button in the morning. Then I spend 3 minutes laying out my clothes, and I mean everything, even my socks, on a chair. The last 2 minutes are for checking my bag. I make sure my keys, my wallet, and my phone are all in the same spot by the door. It sounds tiny, but it removes what experts call decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue. I've heard that before. It means your brain gets tired if it has to make too many choices, right? Like choosing which socks to wear feels like a big job when you're tired.
Precisely. If you decide what to wear at 10 p.m., you save that mental energy for more important things the next day. My neighbor actually noticed the change. She told me she stopped hearing me opening and closing my front door 5 times every morning because I kept forgetting things. It makes the house so much quieter.
I really need that. I think morning James would really appreciate evening James finding the shoes and the keys ahead of time. It's like leaving a little gift for yourself to find when you wake up.
That's a lovely way to put it. When I'm tired at night and I don't want to do it, I tell myself, Elena, you will be so happy and calm tomorrow if you just put these oats in the bowl now. And every single morning, I am thankful for that version of myself from the night before.
It's basically about setting yourself up for a win. Instead of starting the day with a struggle, you start with everything already finished. I'm definitely going to try the key check tonight. I don't want to find them next to the butter ever again. Speaking of setting yourself up for a win, I had a huge project last weekend that I've been avoiding for years, my garage. Elena, it was a disaster zone. I think there was an old bicycle from 1995 buried under some boxes of wet magazines. I was so scared to even open the door.
The garage, that is the ultimate scary task. Most people just close the door and pretend the mess doesn't exist. It's like a monster living in your house.
Exactly. That was my plan for 3 years. But I heard about this tomato timer thing. I think the fancy name is the Pomodoro technique. I decided to try it because I was desperate.
Yes, Pomodoro is just the Italian word for tomato. A man named Francesco Cirillo used a kitchen timer shaped like a tomato to manage his work. The idea is simple. You work for a short time, then take a break. But for really big, scary tasks like your garage, I usually suggest even shorter sprints.
That's what I did. I set my phone timer for just 15 minutes. I told myself, James, you only have to be in this scary garage for 15 minutes. When the alarm goes off, you can run back inside and eat a cookie. It felt like a game instead of a job.
And how did it go? Did you find the floor?
I did. It was amazing. In the first 15 minutes, I cleared enough space to actually walk inside. I felt so good that I did another 15 minutes. Before I knew it, I had 3 big bags of trash and I could see my workbench again. My brain stopped panicking because it knew the torture would end soon.
That is the secret. Our brains hate the idea of forever. If a task feels like it will take all day, we start to procrastinate, which is a big word that just means we avoid doing things because they feel too difficult. I used this method when I had to organize all my old family photos. My aunt gave me a giant box with hundreds of photos from the 1970s.
Hundreds of photos? That sounds like it would take a whole month to finish.
It felt like it. I kept moving the box from the closet to the table and back again for weeks. Finally, I told myself I would only sort photos for 20 minutes while listening to some music. I didn't have to finish the whole box. I just had to do 20 minutes. It took me a week of small sprints, but now they are all in beautiful albums. I felt so proud of myself.
It's funny how a little ticking sound can make us so much more productive. I even tried it with my dog, Buster, yesterday. He has about 50 squeaky rubber chickens all over the living room. I set the timer for 5 minutes and tried to put them all in his toy box. He didn't help much. He mostly just tried to steal the chickens back, but I finished before the timer beeped.
That's a great way to use it. It turns a boring chore into a challenge. For our listeners, this is perfect for English too. Don't tell yourself you need to study for 3 hours. Just set a timer for 15 minutes and focus on one small thing, like a short story or a few new words.
That makes it feel so much more manageable. If I can survive my scary garage for 15 minutes, anyone can survive 15 minutes of English grammar. Elena, before we move on, I noticed we used some really interesting expressions today. Could we go over them? I want to make sure I'm using them correctly.
That is a brilliant idea, James. It is time for Elena's Vocabulary Corner. I have picked 5 phrases from our chat. Let's start with the first one. The phrase is time flies. Repeat after me. Time flies.
Time flies.
Very good. This means that time passes very quickly, usually when you are busy or having fun. In our conversation, we mentioned that when you use a timer for a task, it feels like time flies because you are focusing so hard.
I definitely felt that. It's like when I went to the park with my little nephew last weekend. We were playing football and suddenly it was sunset. I couldn't believe it.
Exactly. Here's another example. I can't believe your daughter is already 10 years old. Time flies.
That is so true. Okay, what is the next one?
The next one is a great idiom, to be swamped. Repeat after me, to be swamped.
To be swamped.
This means to have way too much work to do. Imagine being in a swamp where the water is over your head. You feel overwhelmed. James, you used this when you said you felt swamped by all the old boxes in your garage.
I really did. I felt like I was drowning in old newspapers and broken toys. It was too much.
A fresh example would be, I'm sorry I didn't call you back yesterday. I was absolutely swamped with emails at the office.
I know that feeling. What about the third word? I think it was procrastinate?
Yes, this is a big one. Repeat after me. Procrastinate.
Procrastinate.
To procrastinate means to keep delaying something that you must do, often because it is boring or difficult. We talked about how you procrastinated on cleaning that garage for 3 whole years.
Guilty as charged. I am a professional at finding other things to do when I should be working. I'll even start washing the dishes just to avoid writing a report.
We all do it, James. For example, stop procrastinating and start doing your homework, or you will be up all night.
Which leads perfectly into the next phrase, right?
It does. The 4th phrase is burn the midnight oil. Repeat after me. Burn the midnight oil.
Burn the midnight oil.
This means to stay up very late at night working or studying. A long time ago, people used oil lamps to see in the dark. In our talk, I mentioned a researcher I read about who had to burn the midnight oil to finish her study on time.
I remember doing that in university. I would sit in the library until 3 a.m. with a huge cup of coffee.
Many students do. An example sentence is, I have a huge presentation tomorrow morning, so I'll need to burn the midnight oil tonight to get it finished.
And our last phrase for today?
The last one is in the nick of time. Repeat after me. In the nick of time.
In the nick of time.
This means at the very last possible moment, just before it is too late. We used it when describing how you organized that last shelf just as your 15-minute timer went off.
It was such a relief. It reminds me of last Tuesday when I ran for the train. The doors were literally starting to close, but I jumped inside in the nick of time.
That's a perfect example. Another one is, the ambulance arrived in the nick of time to help the patient. It's a very useful phrase for dramatic moments.
Those are 5 great phrases, Elena. I feel much more confident about using them now, especially procrastinate. I'm going to try not to do that with my English practice. We have covered a lot of ground today, Elena, from talking about our busy schedules to learning those 5 great idioms. It has been a very busy episode. But as we come to the end, I'm thinking about the title of this section, Your Time is Your Life. It sounds very deep, doesn't it?
It does, James, but it is also very simple. We often think of time management as a way to do more work. We want to be faster and more efficient. But the real reason we should manage our time is so we can spend it on things that make us happy. If you manage your time well at work, you have more time for your hobbies, your family, and yourself.
That makes so much sense. It reminds me of a mistake I made last summer. I decided I wanted to build a bookshelf for my living room. I'm not very good at building things, but I thought, how hard can it be? I spent the entire weekend in my dusty garage. It was so hot and I was frustrated because the wood kept splitting. I actually missed my nephew's birthday picnic at the park because I was so determined to finish that shelf.
Oh no! Did you at least finish the shelf?
I did, but it was terrible. It was crooked, and when I put my books on it, the whole thing collapsed the next day. I felt so silly. I realized I had traded a beautiful afternoon with my family for a pile of broken wood. I was trying to be productive, but I forgot to be happy. I spent my life on the wrong thing that weekend.
That is a perfect example, James. We often feel guilty if we aren't doing something, but sometimes the best use of time is just being present. I've been learning this lately with my evening routine. I used to spend my last hour of the day scrolling through news on my phone. It made me feel tired and anxious. A few weeks ago, I started a new habit. I leave my phone in the kitchen at 9 p.m. and I sit on my balcony with a glass of water and just look at the stars or listen to the city sounds.
That sounds much more peaceful than looking at a screen.
It really is. Even though I'm doing nothing, those 20 minutes make me feel so much better the next day. It's about choosing where your energy goes. So my advice to our listeners is this. Don't just try to save time, try to spend it on what you love. Whether that's learning English, walking in the woods, or playing with your pet, that is where your life truly happens.
That is a wonderful thought to end on, Elena. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you to all of you for spending some of your valuable time with us today. We hope this episode helps you feel more confident with your English and your schedule.
Yes, thank you for listening. Before you go, we have a small favor to ask. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a comment. We love reading about your experiences, and your comments help other English learners find our podcast. It really makes a big difference for us.
And don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications. That way, you'll be the first to know when we release a new chat. We have some great topics coming up soon that you won't want to miss.
Have a wonderful week, everyone. Make sure to find some time for yourself.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.